fructose. So we have to think about sugars as different nutrients. Not all sugars are created equally. So controlled feeding studies in laboratory conditions are the best way we would agree to study this effect. And you can basically reproduce the metabolic problems of obesity, such as metabolic syndrome, dyslipidemia, insulin resistance, fatty liver, can be reproduced in humans under controlled feeding conditions if you overfeed sugar as fructose, and the effects of fructose are far worse than for glucose. And the reason partly is because fructose and glucose are metabolized very differently. They're absorbed through very different pathways. There's even evidence that some subgroups of the population don't even absorb as much of the fructose, so you may be protected in effect, whereas others fully absorb fructose and get the negative effects. Part of the other issue is that the sugar content of foods, the specific sugar content, has gone unchecked. The label just says sugars, but does not discriminate between the different types of sugars, does not specify, for example, the specific fructose content, which seems to be the sugar that is most harmful to the body. The other issue I'd like to address is to ask the question, are the negative effects of high sugar consumption reversible? And the answer is partly yes. So we just completed a very comprehensive trial at USC in which we developed, specifically for obese Hispanic teenagers, a 16-week nutrition education program focused on getting them to reduce sugar intake and increase fiber intake. 16-week classes, very comprehensive, cooking demonstrations, outings to the supermarket. And the overall result is actually very disappointing. So despite this very intense, efficacious intervention with information, the overall reduction in sugar consumption was not that high. In fact, it was not even significant. And in the group as a whole, there was not significant metabolic improvements. So at that level, that doesn't bode very well. But the good news is there's a subgroup of people in this study who do improve sugar intake for whatever reasons. Maybe they're more intrinsically motivated. Maybe they live in areas where they have better access to healthy foods. Maybe they have the metabolism or the gene that makes them more responsive to these types of interventions. But in those subjects who did improve sugar intake by about 50 grams per day, which is about one soda, there was significantly measurable improvements in some of these metabolic outcomes. And the revved up pancreas that I talked about earlier was in fact slowed down. So you can dampen down the revved up pancreas by consuming less sugar. So I'd just like to summarize with a couple of points. Sugar has direct detrimental effects on the body. Regardless of whether or not it causes obesity, there are additional unique effects of sugar on the body related to effects on the pancreas, the liver, key organs involved with metabolic regulation, with fructose in particular being the sugar that has the most damaging effects. These effects are reversible, but they're difficult to achieve through behavior and education alone. Presumably there are other factors in play that are overpowering the effects of nutrition, education, and behavior, such as intrinsic motivation to change, environment, peer pressure, social marketing, and so on and so forth. So thank you for your attention this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Next presenter, please.
Yes. Hi. I'm Glenn Lopez. I'm an assistant professor of family medicine at the UCLA Department or School of Medicine. I am not a researcher in obesity. I was asked to speak here more because of my involvement in trying to bring services to underserved populations here in Los Angeles. My work has been primarily in the San Fernando Valley area. And as such, I did spend 6 years in one of the middle schools in the Valley, public middle schools, screening for asthma and dealing with the issue of asthma. Over the 6 years, we screened over 3,500 children. And as part of that, we did do the weight and height on the children. And even though the statistics that are quoted in the UCLA Center for Health Policy Research study are alarming by themselves. For instance, that between 12 and 18 years of age, 30% of the children are overweight or obese. I want to remind everybody that these are averages. In the middle school where I am involved, it is closer to 64% are overweight. A full 31% of the student body is obese with a 95th or greater percentile body mass index. But my focus was not, at least originally, on obesity. It was on asthma. And so we were screening for asthma. But what struck me was, of those children that we did pick up with asthma, which is 14% of the population, 70% of them are obese. Over 90% of them are overweight. There is a very direct correlation between obesity and the severity and frequency of asthmatic exacerbations. And so this was something that was definitely an issue that we needed to address. And when we had our meetings with the family members, the consumption of sweetened beverages was ubiquitous. It was always an issue in terms of the sodas or non-carbonated sweetened beverages, the amounts that were being consumed that needed to be addressed. I wish my exposure had ended there, but about 4 years ago now, I started a group diabetes clinic for the Department of Health Services in their at the Van Nuys facility, and there, well, I see the graduates from the high schools now, and they are now adults with diabetes, and it's been a difficult issue there because it is so prevalent in the San Fernando Valley amongst the Latino population, which makes up most of the San Fernando Valley, at least the eastern side. There's a tremendous amount of diabetes, and 2 out of 3 people who have diabetes are presently not being treated. So for them, it's a very difficult situation, and to try and address them, in addition to the work I'm doing for the county, I've begun a mobile clinic that goes out to 8 communities. It's being supported by 8 churches and by Providence Healthcare. And we are making bi-monthly visits and giving appointments to treat people primarily with diabetes who do not have access to care. And in both the county facility and in these community stops, the issue of the consumption of sweetened beverages is front and center. We find that those people who are able to get off of these drinks will immediately see improvements in their blood sugars, and over time are much more likely to lose weight than those who don't. I would also like to mention, as part of the treatment of diabetes, yes, obesity is an issue in the prevalence of diabetes, but the consumption of sweetened beverages is what throws your sugar up very rapidly in the short run, and so there's no pills that can control this rapid rise in the blood sugar in people with diabetes. We have to go into insulin, and that increases greatly the cost and makes it more difficult for people to accept this treatment. So anything that you all can do that will help to make it easier for children who later become adults to do the right thing, to be able to consume beverages that are more healthy and